Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto travels around the world and builds his own massive harem and becomes a harem legend, part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanatic. October 10th. That's all that could be heard throughout Konoha, the strongest village in the elemental nations. Whether it be from civilians or the shinobi yelling out orders or the screams right before their deaths. The reason for this is because only a few days ago word had reached Konoha that the Kyuubi no Kitsune, the greatest of the Biju, was on its way towards Konoha and was now only a few hundred feet from the walls. Although for the fourth Hokage Namikaze Minato, the leader and strongest ninja Konoha has ever produced was only concentrated on the screams of one person, his wife Namikaze Uzumaki Kushina. She was currently in labor with their first child, a son. He wasn't even due for another 3 weeks, but Minato knew of only one way to stop the Kyuubi, and after a lengthy and hazard to his health argument with his wife she agreed to the plans, which was why they had to induce the pregnancy. Finally, after what seemed like forever, both parents heard the sound of crying and knew that their family was finally finished, for however short it may be. With a nod, Minato looked at the nurse after she cleaned him and handed him to Kushina and left the family alone. "He looks just like you, Minato-kun," said Kushina, then added, "which means he must get the brains from me," with a laugh from the both of them. Suddenly the door opened and there stood 3 figures. The oldest of them the previous leader of the village, the Sandaime Hokage Sarutobi Hiruzen, with titles such as the God of Shinobi and the Professor. The next one was the legendary Sannin Jiraiya, the Great Toad Sage, a world-known pervert and student of the Sandaime and teacher to Konoha's Yellow Flash himself, and the last and youngest one was Hitaki Kakashi, student of Namikaze Minato. Sarutobi looked at the happy family for a few seconds with a smile on his face, but it soon dropped. "Minato, are you sure you want to do this? You know that I can do it," he said. Minato looked at his predecessor and said with a small sad smile, "Yes, I must do this. I knew what being Hokage meant and I swore to protect the village with my life." He looked at his student, then his teacher, next was the old man himself, then finally to his wife and son. "Besides, he won't be alone. Naruto will have all of you when I'm gone." Jiraiya looked at his apprentice, Naruto still went with the name, I see. Minato and Kushina smiled at him and said together, "It was your best book," which had Sarutobi and Kakashi to chuckle and Jiraiya to pout. As they were going to continue their conversation, a loud roar echoed throughout Konoha. Minato sighed and looked at his wife as she held onto their son. He noticed that she was still pale but didn't think much of it. "It's time, Kushina. I must leave now before more people die." He walked over to her and kissed her long and hard and hugged her for what seemed way too short for either of them. He took his son into his arms and kissed his forehead, causing Naruto to wake up and grab a lock of his spiky yellow hair dangling in his son's face, causing a yelp to come from the strongest ninja alive and laughs from everyone else in the room. With a final kiss and hug to his wife, he and the others left to face the Kyuubi and allow Kushina to rest, never noticing the growing pile of blood. On the way to the wall they stopped at the Hokage Tower to pick up the supplies. When they arrived at the wall, Minato bit his finger and went through some hand seals and called out Kuchio's no jutsu, and once the smoke cleared a giant toad appeared. He looked around him and spotted the group. "What did you call me for, Minato?" he asked. Minato looked up at him and said, "I need you, Gamabunta, to take me and my son to the Kyuubi, then hold him as long as you can while I prepare the jutsu." The newly named Gamabunta looked wide-eyed at that, then said, "So you're going to use it after all? Alright, let's get going." And with that said, Minato with Naruto in his arms jumped onto Gamabunta and raced off where his ninja were stalling the Kyuubi. When the trio arrived, the ninja cheered for their leader. As Minato looked around at the damage, his eyes finally landed on the Kyuubi. "Gamabunta, hold it as long as you can while I draw the seals on Naruto." Gamabunta replied, "I'll do my best, but I won't last long against that kind of power." As Gamabunta attacked and dodged the Kyuubi, Minato started the delicate process of drawing the seals on his son's stomach. As he finished, he planted a kiss to his son's forehead and started the sequence of seals for the jutsu. Kyuubi, I do not know why you are attacking, but I cannot let you continue, he yelled at the beast. As he finished the last seal, he yelled out, Shiki Fujin. There was a bright flash and the other ninjas stopped what they were doing to watch. They were shocked at what they saw. What have you called me for, mortal? A voice asked. As Minato looked behind him, he saw the Shinigami. It had fangs poking out of its mouth with horns on its head and purple skin. It also had a large knife like Gamabunta. He looked it in its eyes and said low enough so only the Shinigami could hear him, Shinigami-sama, I have summoned you to seal the Kyuubi into my son to stop its destruction. Shinigami looked at Kyuubi and said, very well, but as stated, I will have your soul as payment. Hi, arigato Shinigami-sama. Minato watched as the Shinigami's arm went through him to the Kyuubi and stuck its hand into the creature. As it pulled back, it brought with it the soul of the beast, but it was not acting like it was before. It looked around as if it didn't recognize where it was. As the Shinigami placed its soul into his son, he finished the process by drawing the remaining seals on his son's stomach before he died. As he finished, he saw the same three people arrived next to him, but before he could say anything, though, Sarutobi spoke up. Minato, I'm sorry, but there were complications with Kushina after we left. She was bleeding and the doctors couldn't stop it. She wrote a letter to Naruto before she died roughly 30 minutes ago. Minato looked on wide-eyed. That was not supposed to happen. She was supposed to raise their son. Hear his first words, watch his first step, watch him as he entered his first day at the academy. He let a few tears fall from his face before he looked back up. Sarutobi, tell the people my last wish is for them to see my son as the hero he is. For now he will take his mother's name until he is strong enough for his full name. I have left further instructions in the safe in the office. With that said, the Shinigami pulled out his soul and ate it. With his anchor gone, Gamabunta returned to the world of the summons. Sarutobi picked up Naruto and held him close and rocking him back and forth to quiet his crying at the loss of his father. Jiraiya looked at his student before picking him up as the rest of the shinobi and kunoichi surrounded their fallen leader. After the Sandaime issued orders, the two adults, one young teen, and one baby left back to the village. As Minato opened his eyes, he suspected to be in the belly of the Shinigami. He did not expect to be in a throne-like room with who he assumed is the Shinigami, as he looked different from before, looking at him and saying, we have much to discuss. 5th anniversary of the Kyuubi attack, October 10th. A little boy with blonde hair, blue eyes, and 3 whiskers like marks on each cheek was running from a crowd of villagers and shinobi trying to find a place to hide. Today was his 5th birthday and he wanted to enjoy the festival like everyone else, so he ignored the warnings of Sandaime Gigi and had left the safety of his apartment. The reason a boy so young that was living on his own is because on his 4th birthday the orphanage had kicked him out, saying, "You're old enough, demon, so get out of here and die." He had been living on the streets for 6 months before his Gigi had found out what happened and had managed to get him an apartment in the slums section of Konoha, the only place that would allow Naruto to live. As he ran, he turned a corner and realized his mistake when he saw it was a dead end. He turned around only to find that he was already trapped. He looked at the villagers brandishing their weapons, yelling obscenities at him, and looked at the ninja also amongst the crowd and on the roofs of the adjacent buildings, also getting out their kunais and shurikens and any other weapons they had. Some were even going through hand seals, taunting him. Naruto started to panic and yelled out things like, "Why are you doing this?" and "What have I ever done to you?" This only seemed to anger the crowd more as they started yelling back, "You're a demon." And, "How dare you? You killed our families, you little Kyuubi brat, and now we're going to finish what the Yondaime started." With that they charged the poor boy and started kicking him and hitting him. Then they cut him and stabbed him with their weapons. After about 10 minutes of that, one ninja picked him up and started banging his head against the wall, watching as more and more blood dripped from his head. As Naruto started drifting to unconsciousness, he saw the same man's eyes turn red with two tomos in each eye. He started going through hand seals and called out Kaden, Gokaku no Jutsu before he took a deep breath and a large ball of fire shot out of his mouth and engulfed Naruto. The last thing he heard were the people cheering for the demon's death. During their cheering, they all suddenly stopped when they felt a lot of killing intent. They all turned around and saw one very pissed off Sandaime Hokage. Anbu, he yelled. Suddenly he was surrounded by at least 20 Anbu. Kill the villagers and take the shinobi to Ibiki, then after he's done with them execute them. All of the Anbu chorused, "Hi," and started. The Sandaime ran over to Naruto with Inu and Neko, two of just many Anbu who had guarded the boy since his birth, and was horrified at what they saw. He gently picked him up and did a quick Shunshin no Jutsu and teleported to the hospital. He quickly ran in and called for the best doctor, which happened to be one of the few who did not hate the boy. After the doctor got over the shock in which Naruto was in, he called a few nurses and started working. After a couple of hours, the doctor came back out. The Sandaime immediately started asking questions. "How is he, doctor?" The doctor took a breath before replying, "I've never seen so much damage before. The Kyuubi's chakra is healing him, but with the amount of damage and how severe some of his wounds are, I'm not sure if that will be enough," he quietly said. The old man was in shock. He had barely heard everything else the doctor had told about his condition. He had failed Minato and Kushina in protecting their child so many times, and now even with the Kyuubi's amazing healing abilities he could still die, the child that he saw as his own grandson. He couldn't bear to think of that little ball of sunshine wouldn't be calling him Gigi anymore. He quietly thanked the doctor and made his way into Naruto's room. He saw all the equipment attached to the boy. He silently sat in a chair by his bed and gently grabbed his hand, praying that he would make it through this. He was so deep in thought that he barely heard the door open, but knew it was not anyone coming to harm Naruto as he recognized the chakra signature. When the door fully opened, in walked one of his personal Anbu, Inu. One who was very attached to the boy. He looked at his leader and asked, "How is he?" The Sandaime looked more like a worried family member at that point than the god of shinobi and replied, "Even with his healing abilities, the doctor estimates a 10% survival rate. Apparently many of the weapons had been coated in different poisons, and that is taking most of his healing abilities right there, and there are so many more." Inu looked back at his young charge and took off his mask. Who appeared was none other than Hatake Kakashi. He walked over and ran his hand through the boy's hair that still had clots of blood and dirt in it. He bent down and placed a kiss on his bandaged forehead and whispered as a tear ran down his cheek, "Don't give up, Otudo. I know you can beat this. There's still so much I want to teach and show you." The Sandaime smiled at the scene, knowing that there were people besides himself who loved the boy. When he saw Kakashi put his mask back on, he knew it was time to be serious. With a stern face, the Hokage looked at his Anbu and said, "Inu, report. As ordered, the villagers have been executed and the shinobi have been sent to Ibiki. From what we've already received so far, it seems some civilian council members have offered an award for the demon's death. My team and many others are waiting your orders, Lord Hokage." Sarutobi took on a hard expression and ordered, "Get rid of the trash, no mercy." Inu nodded and disappeared. While that was going on, Naruto awoke in what looked like a sewer. He jumped up when he heard a voice coming from one of the ends of the tunnel. Figuring this voice must know where he is and how he got here, he started to head towards it. After a few minutes, he walked into a huge room with a large cage with a piece of paper with the kanji for seal written on it. The voice that he could recognize as feminine was still calling out to him, so he got closer to the cage. When he got close enough, he was surprised at what he saw. It was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, and he had seen many beautiful women in Konoha who didn't hate him. She had long red flowing hair to the mid of her back. A heart-shaped face with red eyes and red lips with a light tanned skin. Her were quite large, easily DDs with wide hips and a perfect and legs that went on forever. She was wearing a red kimono showing a bit of cleavage with designs of sakura petals, and on the back was the legendary Kyuubi no Kitsune. His jaw was on the floor and she giggled at him, which startled him out of his trance. He started to blush and uttered the only word he could think of, beautiful. She then also blushed a bit and thanked him. He looked at her again and asked, Anyo, but who are you and where are we? Also, why is someone as pretty as you locked in a cage? She smiled at him but also frowned. She started to cry, and Naruto, not liking seeing people cry, especially beautiful women, ran into the cage and hugged her. Kyuubi was startled when she opened her eyes to see her jailer hugging her, trying to comfort her. She was so glad but also afraid of what he might do when she told him of whom she was. She cleared her throat and got his attention. She smiled at him, which made him blush again, and she started speaking. Naruto-kun, and before you say anything, yes, I know your name. In fact, I know everything about you since you were born. The reason for this is because I've been sealed inside you since then. He looked at her with wide eyes and asked, then who are you? She calmed herself down before beginning again. Naruto-kun, you know the story of how the Kyuubi attacked Konoha the day you were born and the Yondaime killed the Kyuubi but died too, correct? Naruto nodded and said, of course everyone knows that. Well, that's only partially correct, she said, earning a raised eyebrow from the little boy, which she thought looked incredibly cute. He asked, which part? The part of him killing it. You see, even a man as strong as the Yondaime was not strong enough to kill the Kyuubi, so he did what others have done before to the tailed beasts. He sealed it away at the cost of his own life by summoning the Shinigami, who is the only being besides the rest of the gods that is stronger than the Kyuubi. He listened on with wide eyes as she continued. But you see, he couldn't just seal a being such as the Kyuubi into anything. A vase would be pointless since it would break free in only a matter of minutes. An adult would be no good because they wouldn't be able to withstand Kyuubi's chakra because their own chakra networks have already been formed. So the only being strong enough to contain the greatest of the Biju is ironically a newborn baby. This is because a baby's chakra pathways have not yet developed, so they can adapt to the demon's chakra. She explained. She watched as emotion after emotion and finally understanding crossed the boy's eyes. He looked at her and spoke, I was the child, wasn't I? She nodded and he gulped as he prepared his next question. Then that means you're the Kyuubi no Kitsune? He again asked. She replied, yes, Naruto-kun, I am the Kyuubi no Kitsune. But I want you to know that not all demons are bad as humans believe. He looked at her, still hugging her, unable to move from everything he had just learned. I guess that makes sense since you don't seem very mean to me. She smiled at him and hugged him tighter and begun crying again. Kyuubi-chan, what's the matter? Why are you crying? He asked. Kyuubi blushed at the chan suffix and thought, I can't believe a 5-year-old is making me blush, a cute 5-year-old but a 5-year-old nonetheless. She bent down and looked him in the eyes and said, it's because of me, Naruto-kun, that you lost your family, that the villagers and shinobi hate you and hurt you. You should hate me because of everything that I've done. She sniffed and wiped her eyes as the tears continued pouring down. Kyuubi-chan, it's not your fault. If they can't tell the difference between a jailer and its prisoner, then that's their fault. Besides, I have a feeling that the reason I heal so quickly is because of you, so you've been helping me without me even having to ask you for help. He smiled at her as he wiped the tears from her face. She looked at him shocked, thinking, how can he be so kind and caring after everything he's been through? I promise you, Naruto, I'll always be there for you. She smiled and hugged him tighter as he let her rest her head on his shoulder. After a few minutes of letting her calm down and straighten herself out, he asked her where they were. She laughed nervously since she had forgotten that question. Well, Naru-kun. Damn, Naru-kun, now what the hell's wrong with me? We are in your mind right now. The reason it looks like a sewer is because it represents what you are usually feeling, and you usually feel sad and lonely, which gets you the sewer. Since you're here now, why don't you try to change the scenery to something better? He agreed and closed his eyes. His eyebrows scrunched up in concentration looked so cute to her she had to restrain herself from glomping him. When he had the image in his head he heard a gasp from who he assumed was Kyuubi and opened his eyes. It was exactly like he imagined, only more lively. There was forest behind them and you were able to see some animals in it. To the right was a waterfall with a pond big enough to bath in or swim or anything else, hint hint adult stuff nosebleed. In front of them was a wide open plain with animals roaming around and way off into the distance you could see snow-covered mountains. Kyuubi looked around awestruck at how beautiful it was. She turned around and this time did glomp Naruto repeating how beautiful it was. He motioned to her neck and she felt a choker there. That is basically the seal and all this the cage. I've allowed you to alter anything you like and to add anything also. He smiled at her as she once again cried, but this time of tears of happiness. After walking around a bit Naruto grabbed Kyuubi's hand and motioned for them to sit down. When they did she could see the hesitation on his face. What's the matter Naru-kun? You can ask me anything you know. He looked into her eyes and knew that what he was about to ask was big but he believed her. Q-chan, he started. She blushed at her new nickname but let him continue. If you're willing to tell me I would like to know why you attacked Konoha. She looked at him for a few seconds then nodded her head. I was sleeping in my den when I was attacked by a man who had yellow slitted eyes and smelled like snakes and used snakes in his jutsu. I chased him out of my den and turned around to go back in, but as I turned around there was another man there. Unlike the other man, his eyes were red with 3 tomos in each eye that morphed together and he used one of his eye's powers to trap me into a powerful genjutsu. He tortured me in my human form for 72 hours in that genjutsu when in reality it had only been a second in the real world. He then used my broken mind to control me and had me attack Konoha. The rest you know, but even though I don't know the first man I do know who the second one was. Naruto looked at her with wide eyes. What happened to her was terrible. He quickly hugged her telling her everything was okay as she began to cry. I believe I know who the man who attacked you first. He sounds like the snake Sanin Orochimaru who betrayed the leaf shortly after the Yondaime was chosen for Hokage. What was the name of the second person? I know him because he had used me before using the same method to attack Konoha during the reign of the Shodai. Luckily with the Shodai's bloodline he was able to stop me and the man, but he still lives after all these years. He knew he would need help of controlling me again, which is why he used the first man to distract me. The name of that man is Uchiha Madara. Naruto was once again shocked. The man who helped found Konoha has tried to destroy it at least twice. Not only that, but he'd have to be over 100 years old by now. Q-chan, do you know how he is still alive? She nodded and asked, Naruto-kun, do you know where bloodlines originate from? He shook his head and she explained. You see, about 90% of the world's bloodlines originate from demons. The other 10% come from the gods. Reason there are more demonic bloodlines is because before the age of ninja humans and demons lived together in peace. There were a few humans and demons of course that didn't get along as well. Well, some of those demons fell in love with the humans and they had children. From this is where most bloodlines started. After many generations the bloodlines got stronger, but with that the humans got greedy, wanting that power for themselves. Since I was the strongest of demons about a century before the Rakudo Senninai was attacked by a group of men wanting my power. They used an ancient demonic spell to take some of my power before I managed to drive half of them away after I killed the other half. This is how the Sharingan was created. I was not worried about my power being taken because unknown to humans, when a demon's power is taken unwillingly there are problems that come with that power. For one, since I am a female, any male that uses my power will start to lose their sanity, and the longer they keep that I activated the faster it happens. Second, in order to achieve the second to last form of the Sharingan the user must kill their best friend. This happens to both males and females. This form is called the Mangekyo Sharingan. The longer the user uses this form the faster they lose the sight of their eyes. Truly a wonderful side effect for a Dujutsu user. But the final form of the Sharingan is how Madara still lives today. This form is called the Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. This form grants the user eternal youth and immortality. In order to achieve this form, you must take the eyes of another Mangekyo Sharingan user, but not just any, it must be your own relative. The closer the blood is, the more successful it will be. Madara took the eyes of his brother to achieve his form, and so far he is the only one who has achieved this. Naruto was just sitting there absorbing the information, which he concluded in one sentence. So we got one crazy psychotic lunatic out there that is immortal and probably the strongest person in the world, and a bunch of crazy male Uchihas running around Konoha acting as the police force. She nodded with a smile. Great. Just fucking great. Naru-kun, watch your language. She scolded him. He looked at her with a raised eyebrow for a few seconds before both burst out laughing. Thanks Q-chan, I needed that. She smiled and said, no problem. Q-chan, you wouldn't happen to know who my parents were, would you? Actually Naru-kun, I do know of who your father is. He looked at her with wide eyes before jumping her, repeating, tell me, over and over again. She laughed and told him to calm down. Once he obliged, she began. Now I could just tell you, but I want you to figure it out on your own with the hints I give you. I know how smart you are, so it shouldn't be that hard, okay? He nodded. She smiled and said, alright, now tell me your hair color and eye color. He just told her, yellow hair, blue eyes. She nodded, trying to keep from imaging the look on his face when he finds out. Good, now who else in Konoha has that combination? He thought for a second and came up with the Yamanakas, but their hair wasn't spiky like his, and the hair and eye color were a lighter shade. He remembered Senju Tsunade had a closer shade of hair color to him in a picture he saw in Gigi's office once, but she would have known he wasn't a demon and come back for him if they were related due to her being a med nin. He tried to think of anyone else and could only think of one other person. It was so far-fetched but made the most sense. Why he chose him and not another child. Why he didn't have a father growing up because he was dead and didn't abandon him like the villagers said. Hell, now that he thought about it, he really did just look like a chibi yondaime with whisker marks. He looked back up at her and she knew he figured it out by the look in his eyes. My father is the yondaime. It was more of a statement than a question, but she nodded anyways. This time it was her who hugged him to comfort him when he started to cry. She said soothing words to calm him down. After a while he looked at her and asked her, why? She smiled a sad smile and replied, I had heard a lot about the yondaime during my time outside, and I heard he was an honorable man who loved his village and the precious people inside it. I don't think he could have asked for someone else's child if he couldn't use his own. But instead of asking me, why don't you ask him? He just stared at her like she had grown a second head and said, huh. She pointed behind him at there stood 3 figures, 2 males and a female. The only female had fiery orange-red hair with emerald-looking eyes. She had the body of a kunoichi. The first male his eyes landed on looked exactly like the yondaime. From the hair, eyes, even the famous coat he wore. The last male had on what looked like a black suit. He had black hair and black eyes. The only thing that didn't seem black was his skin. The man in the suit stepped forward and introduced himself. Hello young Naruto. I am the Shinigami and these 2 are your parents, your mother Uzumaki Kushina and your father Namikaze Minato. Everything that Kyuubi has told you is true, by the way, even though I knew you believed her anyways with being a god and all. He chuckled at his own joke, but when he realized no one else did, he started mumbling about, no sense of humor. Kushina and Minato looked at each other and nodded their heads and grabbed each other's hand and walked towards Naruto. When he didn't move, he heard Kyuubi whisper in his ear, go Naruto. Go towards your parents. And with that she gave him a little push, and that was all that was needed as he sprinted towards his parents as they bent down and he tackled them, crying into their shoulders. They just held him tight, cooing him. Kyuubi looked on with tears in her eyes. Shinigami walked past them towards Kyuubi. Kyuubi, how are you? I'm good Shinigami-sama. I don't think I'd rather be in anybody else. As I'm sure you've been watching, I'm amazed at how kind and caring Naru-kun is and how he hasn't lost his sanity with everything that's happened to him. Shinigami just smirked at Naru-kun, and agreed. Indeed, he has a very strong spirit, but do you remember when you were first sealed that I had made a deal with Minato that when Naruto first met you that he would be here as well? She nodded and said, yes, I remember, and I'm glad you allowed his mother to come as well. I'm relieved that she didn't abandon him, but still sad that he had to grow up these past 5 years alone. Shinigami just nodded his head as he watched the family. While those two were talking, the family had finally calmed down when both parents noticed something while hugging their son. When they both looked at each other, they saw the same conclusion that they hoped wasn't real and then looked down at Naruto. Kushina spoke first. Naru-chan, she said, getting his attention. He blushed at the nickname as Kushina smiled at him while Minato chuckled. Naruto, we need you to lift up your shirt so we can confirm something, okay, sweetie? She said, giving him a gentle hug. He slowly nodded his head, having a good idea what they wanted to see. He slowly lifted his shirt and both parents gasped at what they saw. Their child, their only child, their little Naruto was horribly malnourished. You could easily count every rib and the signs of his pelvis too. Both parents were curious at how their village could let this happen to their son, yet alone any child, but before either could ask any questions, a cough alerted them to Kyuubi. Before you two start asking questions, it might be easier to watch what has happened to your son for the past 5 years. With his photographic memory in mind, I've been able to record everything that's happened to him, conscious and unconscious, she suggested. Naruto looked ready to panic that his parents were going to find out what has happened so far and even things he hasn't. With a hand on each shoulder from both Kushina and Minato, they asked him if it was okay. With a slow nod, a large television screen appeared in front of them and a couch behind them. Getting the idea, they sat down and started watching from the moment Kyuubi was sealed into Naruto. They watched as Sarutobi announced to the village how Kyuubi was sealed in Naruto and how he was a hero only for the villagers and shinobi to call for his death. How when he brought Naruto to the council shortly thereafter, and once again the civilian side of the council called for his death and even some tried to attack him. They watched Danzo try to get the boy to make him into a weapon. The only good part from that was that except for the Uchiha clan head, every other clan head was respecting Minato's wishes. They watched his treatment in the orphanage where he had to sleep and what he barely got to eat. When he was kicked out on his 4th birthday and what was said to him till 6 months later when the Sandaime found out and got Naruto an apartment in the slums. Till finally they watched how he was running from the villagers and ninja on his current birthday to their attack on him, and how an Uchiha used a Kaden jutsu to burn him. Then how shortly after Sarutobi arrived pissed off to the news the doctor gave him that startled all 3 of them and Kyuubi because she had been so busy she didn't even notice. Minato and Kushina were glad at how Kakashi viewed and how much he cared for their son. They were going to make him an honorary member of their clan after Naruto's birth. During the viewing, Kushina and Minato were shaking from the crying and rage towards their village. They would take glances at Naruto or hold him tighter during certain viewings and would sometimes see a look of shock on the boy's face from things he found out. At the end, they each took some long breaths to handle their emotions. The first to speak was Naruto. Anyo Otu-san, Okawa-san, who was that man that called me Otudo? I recognize him as an Anbu who protects me a lot. Minato and Kushina smiled at their son and were surprised at how smart he is, but he is their son. Minato spoke next and said, that man was Hitaki Kakashi Naruto-kun. He was one of my 2 remaining students when I was a Junin sensei. Then Kushina spoke up, he is a good and honorable man and we were going to surprise him by making him an honorary member of our clan after you were born, but as you know, things don't always work out the way you want them to. During this conversation, the Shinigami and Kyuubi walked over to them to get their attention. Shinigami cleared his throat and began, I'm sorry to break this up, but as you recall, the reason Naruto is here is because of the attack on him. Unfortunately, due to the circumstance of his injuries, not even Kyuubi's healing abilities will heal him and he is slowly dying. He paused here waiting for an outburst and was not disappointed. As he calmed the two parents, one female Biju, and one 5-year-old, he continued. Now the reason for this is because Kyuubi cannot use more of her chakra because of the seal. If we were to change it to allow more of her chakra, then he will be alright, but this does come at a cost. He paused again to let that set in and continued. Now the seal originally would slowly purify Kyuubi's chakra into Naruto's own, adding to his reserves, and by the time he reached 25 it would be complete and Kyuubi could either come with me to the afterlife or become human with cage level strength. Now because of the recent development, these conditions are still there with some minor changes and additions. For one, the age this would be complete would be 16, and because of adding more demonic chakra to Naruto's system, he will have a new bloodline in addition to the ones he has already, but will be slightly demonic, but no more than any other person with a demonic bloodline. As he looked at the expressions on their faces ranging from shock to curiosity, he was about to continue when Naruto interrupted him. Anyo Shinigiji, what does this bloodline do? Shinigami had a twitch in his eye at the nickname. While the other three were laughing there often, he could swear he heard all the other gods laughing at him. After mumbling to himself for a few minutes, he explained the bloodline. Well, obviously you will have an advanced healing ability, even more so than now. So you'll be immune to pretty much every kind of poison out there, and you'll even be able to regrow limbs. The only ways to be killed will be having your head chopped off or your body is completely destroyed to the cellular level. But the best part, in my opinion, is eternal youth. You'll stop aging at 25 and live to an old age of about 150. Also, of course, this is passable to any children you have and any mates you have. He had a perverted giggle at the end along with Minato while the women were glaring daggers at them. Anyo, what are mates? Naruto asked. Everyone started sweating until they all said together, you'll find out when you're older. Naruto just sweat dropped at that but let it go for now. Meanwhile, Kyuubi was sporting a huge blush that did not go unnoticed by the parents. They looked at each other in silent communication and nodded their heads. Kushina walked over to Kyuubi, who noticed and started sweating. As she pulled her away from the others, she took on a serious expression and said, explain. Kyuubi started stuttering, saying, I don't know what you mean. Kushina gave her a hard look before smiling at her, which freaked out Kyuubi and said, I approve. Kyuubi just stared at her and said, huh. Kushina continued smiling and said, Minato and I approve of you being Naruto's mate or one of his mates until he's older, of course. I've seen how much you care about him and how much he cares about you, and I have a feeling it will only get deeper as he gets older. Just promise me that you'll always be there for him and love him. Kyuubi looked on in shock and thought, am I that easy to read? But started smiling and had a tear run down her cheek as she hugged her future mother-in-law and whispered, thank you and I promise. Kushina just smiled back and hugged her but got a deviously grin on her face and added, just make sure to give me lots and lots of grandchildren. Kyuubi just looked at her shocked before her face turned redder and redder before passing out. Kushina just laughed before picking her back up and heading back to where the others were sitting on the couch and some newly appeared furniture. She had Minato, who was sitting next to Naruto, on the couch move and laid Kyuubi on the couch with her head on Naruto's lap. Minato and Shinigami chuckled while Naruto merely raised an eyebrow as he subconsciously ran his hand through her hair while looking at his mother and asking, what happened? She just smiled the deviously grin again and said, girl talk. As they got back on topic, Naruto looked down at Kyuubi and asked, what will happen to her if I don't accept? Shinigami just said, she will cease to exist as the seal hasn't finished its job. Naruto's neck snapped back up at Shinigami and said, I'll do it. I won't let someone precious to me let that happen to them. The remaining conscious adults smiled at that and Shinigami said, before we begin, is there anything else you two would like to say? Once the process is complete, I'll have to take you back to the afterlife. Minato stepped up to his son and hugged him before saying, Son, no matter what you want to do with your life, know we will always support you. As you may have remembered, Shinigami mentioned that you already have bloodlines, one from your mother and one from myself. We won't tell you what they are because where's the fun in that, but you can find out in the clan estate. It is located about a mile in the forest behind the Hokage monument. The estate is protected by seals, so when you find the front gate, just apply some blood to it and it will open. Also, don't mess with anything that you know you aren't ready for in there. Wait until you're strong enough to protect your precious people before taking your full name. Remember, we love you and are so proud of you already. With that and a final hug and a kiss to the forehead, he let go to let his wife go. Kushina smiled at the scene of Naruto and Kyuubi before she kissed his right cheek and hugged him. There's not much I can add to what your father has already said, but that my bloodline is way cooler. She giggled and Naruto laughed at that while he could see his father try to keep a straight face. There is our family history in our scrolls as well. Learn from it and improve. Make sure to not repeat any mistakes from the past. When you read where I came from, I know you'll be surprised. She said with a smile. Remember to protect your precious people, as that is where true strength comes from. I love you, my little Naru-chan, and never forget that, she finished as she hugged him one last time and this time kissed his left cheek. Naruto cried, knowing this will most likely be the last time he'll see his parents before he joins them in the afterlife. After that was done, Shinigami has Naruto wake Kyuubi to start the process. Q-chan. Time to get up, Q-chan. She snuggled more into his lap and mumbled, few more minutes, Naru-kun, which had him smile at her and blush and the others to chuckle. He shook her a little more until she finally started opening her eyes. She finally realized where she was and blushed and jumped to the other side of the couch. Shinigami chuckled once more before saying, now that Sleeping Beauty is up, we can begin. Kyuubi was confused until Naruto explained what she missed before she jumped up and hugged both Minato and Kushina, and they hugged her back. Kushina decided to have one last teasing moment before leaving and said, now remember, Q, what you promised, and I want at least 3. She giggled at her blushing face before hugging her once more and kissing her forehead and whispering in her ear, take good care of my Sochi-yome, daughter-in-law. Kyuubi looked at her smiling face before she nodded her head and smiled back. Once she was back next to Shinigami and Naruto, Shinigami had the seal appear and was about to start when Naruto asked him a question, nay Shinigami, is there others like me? Shinigami was again heard the adults laughing and was now certain he heard the other gods laughing at him too. He looked at Naruto and replied, yes Naruto, there are, why do you ask? I was wondering if once I got stronger if I could help them and the other Biju, Naruto replied. Shinigami looked into his eyes and saw no deceit and said, the only way would be through extremely advanced fuinjutsu. Tell you what, once you've become strong enough and a seal master on par with your Otu-san, then I'll deliver you the seals that will help each Jinchuriki, which is what you are called, with extracting their demons, as each one will most likely have a different seal and I should know by then what kind of seals they have. Naruto nodded and thanked his Shinigami, and let him continue the process. About 30 minutes later of adding seals that not even Minato recognized to override the old ones not needed and adding a few extra ones, he burned away the old seals and watched as Kyuubi's chakra flooded into Naruto. He started screaming and the others were helpless as they watched, and about 5 minutes later he stopped screaming and fell unconscious as Kyuubi put his head onto her lap as she ran her hand through his hair and was startled by Shinigami as he said, it's finished. He walked back to Kushina and Minato, who had tears in their eyes, holding each other, knowing it was time to leave. As the three of them started to disappear, Shinigami's voice reached Kyuubi and heard what he said, remember to remind the Gaki to not tell anyone what has happened here for now, Kyuubi. She just nodded and continued stroking his hair. After sleeping for 16 hours straight, Naruto slowly opened his eyes and was expecting to be in his mind but recognized that he was in a hospital. He was about to think all of that was a dream until he heard a familiar lovely voice. It wasn't a dream, Naru-kun, it was all real. Shinigami-sama said not to mention anything that happened for now. Also to speak to me, just think it and I'll be able to hear you. Naruto just blinked before closing his eyes and thought, how are you doing, Q-chan? Kyuubi blushed as the very first thought was of her well-being. I'm doing fine, Naru-kun, now that I know you're okay. Naruto just gave her a mental hug and opened his eyes to look around the room. So what do you think I should do now, Q-chan? For now, since it is still dark out, just wait till the morning, since I've noticed the Sandame has been here every day along with others that care about you. I would let them know you're okay now, and when you are discharged, sneak to your clan house to find out about your bloodlines and you can start living there. Also, I was told by your mother that the place has enough food for 3 years so you can start eating healthy and get better. Then if you still want to become a ninja, I can help instruct you, since I'm sure they must have a training ground or some place to train. Naruto just listened to everything she had mentioned and couldn't help but be impressed. Wow, Q-chan, you're amazing. He praised, which earned a blush from our vixen. Soon he was back asleep and woke up at the sound of the door opening. He opened his eyes as he saw his Gigi and immediately woke up and jumped as his back was facing him as he closed the door, yelling, Gigi, and tackled the old man. Sarutobi was shocked but then noticed what the person said. Only one person calls me that, he thought. As he slowly turned around, there he was wide awake, smiling from ear to ear, hugging his Gigi's back. Suddenly Sarutobi began smiling as tears ran down his cheeks as he hugged his Magamusuko grandson. After a few minutes he placed Naruto back on the bed and looked him over for any injuries. When he didn't see any, he asked, how are you doing, Naruto-kun? Naruto smiled at his Gigi and said, I'm good now, Gigi. When can I leave? As soon as the doctor clears you, Naruto-kun, and he should be in here soon. So tell me, do you remember how you ended up in here? Naruto looked down and nodded. Sarutobi looked sadly at the boy. To be only 5 but to be through things not even a veteran ninja would have, he thought. Do you want to talk about it, Naruto-kun? You know I'm always here for you. Naruto just hugged his Gigi and started crying. Even though he's cried with Q-chan and his parents about it, it still hurts. Sarutobi just hugged him tighter and just rocked him back and forth, saying, it'll be alright, Naruto-kun, it'll be alright. After a few minutes the door opened and the doctor walked in. He was shocked as he saw his little patient awake and hugging the Sandame, but smiled at the scene. He walked over to Naruto and began checking him for injuries. After the okay, he discharged Naruto after hugging the boy to let him know that he's not alone. Sarutobi did a quick Shunshin no Jutsu to avoid any villagers and appeared in his office, where he spent the rest of the day with the boy and any Anbu or other people who were worried about him. After a stop at Ichiraku Ramen, in which Naruto set a new record for eating 33 bowls, they left to his apartment, where he wished Naruto good night. Naruto and Kyuubi decided to wait a couple weeks until things calmed down to head to the estate. Once night fell, though, he headed off. It took him 20 minutes just to get to the forest on top of the Hokage monument. After an hour of traveling as quietly as possible into the forest, he finally found it. The place was huge. He found the front gate and, like his Otu-san mentioned, applied his blood to it after a quick bite of his sharpened canines. The lock glowed for a few seconds, then there was an unlocking sound, so Naruto slowly pushed the gate open. After he got through and relocked it, he noticed there were many houses, and the one in the middle he guessed was the clan head's house. The land was overgrown with grass and weeds, and he decided to take care of that problem when he had a chance. He slowly walked to the main house and noticed even though no one's lived here for 5 years, the houses looked well kept on the outside. As he arrived at the door of the main house, he noticed the same lock on the gate, so he applied blood once again and after a few seconds opened the door. When he walked inside, he was awestruck at what he saw. The place looked even bigger on the inside. The only noticeable problem was that the place was dusty as hell, but he figured after 5 years could do that. After traveling for about 10 minutes, he came upon the main bedroom and decided to explore the rest of the house in the morning. Naruto was having the best sleep of his life. He could finally relax, not having to worry if someone was going to break into his apartment and try to kill him. Slowly the sun rose and shined in through the window, landing on his face. He slowly opened his eyes from the warm sensation. When he finally sat himself up in bed, he looked around and smiled to himself. He was finally home. Home. He never thought he would have that, and it felt damn good. He walked through the mansion to see if he could find any clothes that would fit him. After an hour he found 20 sets of clothes from various rooms. He went back to the master bedroom and put the clothes on the bed and headed for the bathroom. He turned on the water to the shower and started scrubbing fast before the water went off, but then he remembered that he wasn't in his old apartment where that old bitch of a landlady had timed his showers and took his time feeling the warmth of the water on his skin. After about 20 minutes he finished and took his towel and walked back to the bedroom. After getting dressed he headed downstairs to the kitchen. He looked around but didn't spot any food. He could have sworn Kyubi told him that there was food here. He opened his mind link with her and called to her. Q-chan. He tried again after no response. Q-chan, you there? He was about to try again but finally got a response. Hanaru-kun. What are you doing up so early? Naruto shook his head and thought. The sun has been up for over an hour now, Q-chan, and I wanted to get started on my training as soon as possible. Anyways, do you know where Okawa-san said the food was, because I don't see any? Kyubi slowly stretched herself awake and remembered what Kushina had said. I remember now. She said that the food was stored in seals in the pantry room in the room next to the kitchen. Just apply a small bit of chakra to the seals and take what you want to eat. Naruto thanked her and walked to the room. As he walked inside he noticed various labels for things like apples and bread and even things like milk. These must be some seals to keep things like milk preserved, he thought. As he was about to apply a small amount of chakra to various seals he quickly remembered an important detail. Laughing nervously he opened his connection to Kyubi and said, Kyubi. I just remembered I haven't accessed my chakra yet. Kyubi's eyes widened as she blushed in embarrassment as she too had forgotten that. Laughing nervously as well she replied, well, I guess the first thing is to unlock your chakra. After he went out back he found what looks like a training ground that would need to be cleaned up, but for now he decided to start his training. Naruto gave her a mental nod when he was ready and she started. To start, sit down and close your eyes. Look deep into yourself till you find something warm and grab onto it and don't let go. Pull it to yourself and make it part of you. Naruto did as told and after about 10 minutes he found it. He grabbed it and pulled it to him. It was so warm and he felt the power running through him. He opened his eyes and saw his chakra around him. It was a dark blue that surrounded his entire body. He calmed down and watched it recede. Kyubi smiled radiantly as she congratulated him. Well done, Naruto, you managed to get it on your first try and in record time. For now, since your body is still repairing itself, which should be finished by the end of the month with you starting to eat healthy every day, we'll work on controlling your chakra. Since you already have high genin level reserves, you'll have to constantly work on your control as it will keep growing with my chakra converting to your own and naturally it increasing as you get stronger. But for now, head back in and have some breakfast. After having the best breakfast ever and restocking the kitchen, he headed back out to continue his training. And so for the next couple months Naruto trained every day, resting on Sunday. Like Kyubi had said, his body was what it should have been and a bit better at the end of the month, and she had him start training his body. He started with 50 push-ups, sit-ups, leg squats and other various exercises, and finishing with 10 laps around the field, which equaled about half a mile in the morning. After that he would take a 30-minute break, then work on his chakra control until he was exhausted. He would visit the old man on Sunday so he wouldn't get suspicious. He had cleaned most of the inside of the mansion and started cleaning up his land. There were still some rooms he hadn't entered yet because there were seals on them. He decided to wait to clean the other houses for now. During those 2 months Naruto found the clan library and it was impressive to say the least. He was sure there were more scrolls here than the Hokage's library. There were about a dozen tables around the room. He walked to a podium in the middle of the room and noticed 2 scrolls on it. The one on the left said, Namikaze Bloodline, on it, and the one on the right said, Uzumaki Bloodline, on it. He opened his Otu-sans first and began to read it. To Naruto. This scroll contains the information on the Namikaze bloodline. Our bloodline is not a dujutsu like the Sharingan or the Byakugan. Ours is a body bloodline. It doesn't have a name, but it is indeed very useful. Our bodies are unique. Every time we are injured, our body becomes harder once we heal. So through constant training, one's body could become theoretically unbreakable. This was how I was able to withstand traveling at the speed of light using my Hiraishin no Jutsu, as only members of the Namikaze family would be able to survive that. Our bloodline was a gift to us by Kami herself. We do not know why she gave this gift to us, but we swore to never abuse this gift. Also, a little bit of interesting info is that most people don't realize, but when the Senju and Uchiha clans settled for peace and decided to find a location to settle down, they were not the ones who settled the land that is now Konohagakure. In fact, when they found the location, the Namikaze clan had already been settled there for a century. We allowed them to settle the lands next to us and helped them build the first ninja village. Over the years, we had managed to own 51% of the lands within the village, and as a result, anything on those lands, as well as an insurance policy. So suffice to say, we are the richest clan in Konoha. Unfortunately, throughout the Great Ninja Wars, many of our clansmen died, and there were only a small handful left when the Kyuubi attacked. I am sorry to say that they were among the first to have died that night, and that you are all that is left of our great clan. I know you will continue to bring honor to the clan, my son, and I love you and wish you a happy life. Your Otu-san, Namikaze Minato, Yondaime Hogake, Konoha no Kiroi Senko, Konoha's Yellow Flash. Naruto finished reading the scroll, amazed at the potential of his father's bloodline, and with his healing ability it would make his body stronger faster. He rolled it back up and opened his Okawa-san's scroll next. To Naru-chan. Our bloodline is possibly one of the strongest in the world. The reason is because of the countless possibilities with it. Our bloodline was a gift from the goddess of the elements. This means that she granted us the use of the ability to control and master fire, wind, earth, water, and lighting. Some members of the clan were able to combine 2 elements once they mastered them to create a sub-element. One, for example, would be Mokuden. That's right, we have the ability to use part of the Shodai's fabled bloodline. This certain element would be a combination of earth and water. Another possibility is water and wind to create Hyoten jutsus. There used to be a bloodline clan that used Hyoten in Kurigakure, but I don't know if any members are still alive due to the bloodline wars that the Yondaime Mizukage started killing off bloodline users. Now, because of our bloodline, we were hunted down and killed during the Third Great Shinobi War. Our homeland was destroyed by a joint attack by Iwa and Kumo, and we managed to save most of the civilians, but I was the only member who survived from my clan. Our clan is from Uzu no Kuni Naruto. This is a special place because it is the last true kingdom. Our clan were the rulers of Uzu no Kuni. My parents were the king and queen of the country. I was their only child and royal princess, and next in line for the throne, and that would make you a royal prince. Since I am gone, that makes you the next in line for the throne. I know this is a lot to take in, and I'm not saying you have to take the position, but as long as our clan lives, then so does Uzu no Kuni. Also, last I heard, the castle of the royal house was still standing, and in the throne room is the sword of the Uzumaki clan. Only someone with Uzumaki blood and only the ruler may wield the sword. This sword is known throughout the elemental nations to any sword master or any aspiring to be sword master. This is because it is the strongest sword in existence. It was a gift from the legendary summons of the Dragon clan. The sword is indestructible and you can channel elemental chakra through it. If you do decide to restore our homeland, you must keep the sword out of view until you're ready to claim your birthright. I suggest making a seal on your wrist and sealing it in there. I told your father about my past after we got married, and the only person who knows of your full heritage is the Fire Daimyo, since the Namikaze clan has been allied with Fire Country since shortly after its beginning in Minato was like a son to him, and sent a letter to him explaining how he planned to defeat the Kyuubi and about who you are, and he will inform his successor if you do not contact him before he retires or dies. Before you get angry that he didn't come to get you, no, he couldn't, because that would have raised questions and could have started the fourth great shinobi war. Well, I believe that's it. I love you, Naruto, and live a happy life. Your Okawa-san. Namikaze Uzumaki Kushina, Konoha's Red Death. Naruto reread that scroll a few times and was shocked at what he found out. He was royalty. He was fucking royalty. He laughed so hard at that. He was definitely going to rebuild his ancestors' homeland. He couldn't wait to see the look on the villagers' faces when they found out. He opened the mental link and called out to Kyuubi. Hey Q-chan, have you been paying attention the past few minutes? He asked excitedly. Sorry Naru-kun, I've been planning your training. Why, what's going on? He smirked. He sat down and closed his eyes, entering his mindscape. He saw Kyuubi standing in front of him looking as beautiful as ever. He still had that smirk on his face, and when she noticed it, she raised an eyebrow. She looked at him and said, Well, are you going to tell me? He continued smirking and said, Look through my memories for the past 10 minutes. She nodded, and he watched her face as it went from intrigue from his father's bloodline to amazement to his mother's bloodline to outright shock from her origins. She still had a shocked face when she settled on his still smirking face. He chuckled at her face and said, Well, what do you think? That broke her out of her trance and said the only thing that came to mind, Well, fuck, that's awesome. You have the potential to be the strongest person on the planet, Naru-kun. And you are fucking royalty. I actually remember Uzu no Kuni. I can't believe I could have missed something like that. I mean, your mother's maiden name is fucking Uzumaki. She said, then broke out laughing with Naruto along with her. That was definitely one of his favorite memories. It was the start of a new year and the start of the third month of training, and Kyuubi had Naruto start on the tree climbing exercise and up his physical training. Instead of 50 sets of everything, she had him do 100, and instead of 10 laps she increased it to 15. Naruto continued cleaning up the grounds on his days off and found seeds for flowers in a greenhouse that was used for making poisons and antidotes. He found out he had quite a green thumb and enjoyed gardening as it helped relax him. It was March now and the 5th month of Naruto's training. It was his first Sunday off, and he decided to leave the compound and take a stroll, run through the forest. He was coming across the Hyuga compound and noticed a person jumping over the wall with a bundle that looked like it was moving. He had heard of the Kumo delegation coming to Konoha for a treaty and also how they wanted the Byakugan. Deciding to take the risk, he followed the person, and once he got close enough, he noticed the headband was from Kumo, and he was sure there was something alive in the bag. He crept up closer to hear what the man was saying when he stopped. The plan was perfect. Now that we've got a Byakugan and the heiress herself, we can breed her and start our own army of Byakugan wielders in Kumo, and I'll be regarded as a hero for capturing her. He laughed and was about to start running again when a voice caught his attention.